This is the night, it's a beautiful...
Yup, modern logo inserted at the start. I'm a little nicer here, since they don't cut the music around, plus I'm more nostalgic for this logo, but still. I completely forgotten this existed. What a nice surprise it was. Even cat people cannot deny this. Nothing against cat people, but you all know it's true. A few points on the aspect ratio being the first CinemaScope animated feature. Going from the Academy ratio to one nearly twice as wide isn't just a matter of wider backgrounds. The visual vocabulary of most techniques changes dramatically, especially how an animator goes about moving characters across the screen. And they had to pre-plan it. And they needed a backup version in the old narrow ratio. All in 2 years and change. Yet you'd never know any of these difficulties to look at it. You'll forgive me for gushing, but this is worthy enough for double positive karma. I'll be fair and mention that it does lack any multi-playing camera work, even where it would seem appropriate. Aww. There'll be a few of these throughout, folks, so fair warning. This has to be mentioned. Ladies' owners have faces too similar to other recent adults in the Disney canon. Darling is almost the same as Mrs. Darling from Peter Pan. We don't see their faces much, but still. The paper Jim Deere puts on the floor, as you might expect given I'm bringing it up, vanishes. Did you catch that jump in the soundtrack? Disney, your editing is normally so top-notch. The chair Dim Deer props up disappears on at least one occasion. Add to that the shadow of its legs not going under the door when Jim Deer's legs do. Guess it pulled a Peter Pan on us? That shadow is also a bit too long for a light source not on the floor.
But remember, just for tonight.
Even those of us who have never had a pet can relate to that.
Oh no!
What's wrong, Jim? What is it?
Can't you explain to Lady about Sundays?
A lot of the dog experiences in this film just write themselves, and that's what makes them so lovely, because they're so true.
In my bunny bank in the backyard.
Something that is true about the 50s Disney films, bar Sleeping Beauty, is that they are more cartoony than the ones from the Golden Age. Lady and the Tramp uses this lighter tone to the best effect. Side characters like Jock gain extra personality from being ethnic stereotypes. Petty here, but Trusty's head is of a different shade than his body. Alone, not a problem, except sometimes they are the same shade. Aside from the fact, I can't decide which I prefer.
And a license.
I don't know why, but that moment just seems awkward. Maybe the line delivery is a little too forward for Lady.
I don't imagine anything could ever take her place in our hearts.
See, they say that, but they had to have been planning the baby by then. Unless Disney wants us to believe it was an accident. And I'm sure they don't. This shot in particular captures the nostalgic quality and feeling of small-town America really well. Lady did a lovely doggy stretch earlier, but this one never fails to leave me in awe. Let's be grateful the Disney artists had the dogs down pat. Add to that the sounds. I can still hear him stretching, folks. Tramp is mostly grey trout, but he's light brown here and a few other times. The dog's coats are always just one shade, so yeah, I don't know.
Oh, cute little rascals.
I agree with Tramp. Aww. I like how the filmmakers build it up like he's going to steal the food, but instead they give him a bone. So they expect us to believe the bone has no marks in it after Tramp tore out at least a bit of flesh? Not happening.
Hi, gals. How's pickings? Pretty slim, eh?
Ha! Nah, but that is pretty funny.
After all, in your condition, alone here all day.
Jim Deere is showing concern for Darling here, but we later see that it's at least 6 months before the delivery. Bit early for that, I think. What made Trusty's nose go briefly brown on us? Search me. We later learn that they can't know what gender the baby will be, so Darling's certainly making some presumptions with those. Lady's been taking more from Trusty than just his stories. Her collar's changing colour just like his nose did earlier. One of the things that really sells the romance is how believably it develops. It's not about two people thrown together by fate. Instead it develops through them living in the same community and crossing paths multiple times. A warm, homely, small-town love affair. On that note, you have to love the film's nostalgic quality. It's not for childhood like so many Disney films, but rather for the all-American small town before the tech boom, where dogs are wonderful companions. A touch conservative, but so wonderfully realised. The days that the various dates fall on often don't match up with later shots on other months, nothing we'd normally notice, but someone still painted them wrong. The transition techniques they use during this time lapse are really effective. To a dog, all this lack of attention would seem really warped.
Darling, are you sure you want watermelon?
As always, it's coded enough that a child wouldn't think twice about it, but still bizarre to see pregnancy cravings implied so explicitly in that era.
Why, that's just what I told Bill yesterday. Bill, I said, darling looks radiant.
Obviously, we only hear ladies' owners as being called Jim Dear and Darling. That doesn't need to be explained. But all the other mothers and women calling her darling here. What?
Doctor, it's a boy!
Yes, I know.
I love how uncaring the doctor is. He's reached a point where even the birth of a child doesn't excite him one bit.
I just can't understand.
Hard to believe, but this is the first song since the opening, at nearly the half-hour mark. I'd almost forgotten it was a musical, and that feels weird. Yeah, I've no idea either why Lady's reflection bends down when she doesn't. The gesture where Lady flinches from Jim Deere is great, as though she thinks he'll strike her. Dogs are smart in their own way. They would react like that, given what happened before. I can't believe I'm saying the artist put in too much work, but the baby's head is painted 5 shades past the point of realism. Uncanny Valley before computers, folks.
Rock-a-bye baby on the treetop.
Seems Aunt Sarah gets her baby nurturing skills from one of those 5-minute pamphlets.
We are Siamese, if you please.
I'll address the elephant in the room. It's not sensitive to sing the praises of this number, given the cat's Asian features and accents. But, setting aside the English lyrics, the animation and music play in weirdly peculiar tandem, never quite becoming slapstick, but making for a hypnotic and enchanting number, and spooky to non-cat people. And Siamese cats are wacky, mayhem-loving felines, so the portrayal here, minus the problems, is more accurate than you'd think. Small thing, but the pattern on the mantle doesn't move as it's being pulled here. I'm not the first to spot this, but watch the fish as the bowl is being pulled. One of the subtlest gags the Disney artist ever put to sell, I reckon. The curtains Lady's tangled up in go from blue to red. Spill dye? I don't think so. The Siamese cats never appear again. It's not the kind of structural flaw that affects the film, as their purpose is just to get Lady muzzled so she meets Tramp again, but it is a bit odd. I love that man put out water for Tramp. He gets around. I'll admit it, dogs aren't perfect angels. They can be vicious. Are you happy, cat people? But the film gets points for having enough moments when the more animal instincts show true. That Tramp is a sly one, isn't he? But these are the sequences where we just smile because of the clever way the characters sneak by.
Do you suppose you could nip this contraption off for us?
Glad to oblige.
Why the weird echo?
You can keep it! I can?
Uh-huh. It's a free sample.
A nice moment in any film where the street-smart character is showing the previously secluded character around is when the latter begins to adapt to the former savvy ways when needed. To put it simply, Lady is learning from Tramp.
Ants, cats, muzzles.
Come to think, that's 3 of what are probably a dog's top 5 worst misfortunes. Lady did get it rough. It really shows how important dogs were to people in this fuzzy nostalgic time period that Tony would give Tramp and Lady a proper dinner free of charge. Either that or he's going senile. By praising specific elements, I run the risk of sidestepping the fact that the impact of animation, and indeed cinema, is as a whole, not the sum of its parts. And what better example than a spaghetti dinner? Everything comes together here. The love ballad, the backgrounds, the marvellous character animation, and what do we get? A scene so iconic that even people who have a regrettable bias against animation adore it.
Oh, this is the night.
Of course, I'm still going to praise the specifics. The film's soundtrack is the best since Dumbo, but Bella Notte is the standout. Good love songs have a connection to the soul, and this is one of Disney's best. It's the character animation that really sells it. Forget that I'm an animation buff. The movements and body language are so recognizable as that of dogs, and they make the implication that they're falling in love just feel right. That's the power of great hand-drawn animation. So much work goes into the effort of making you forget you're even looking at drawings. Don't mean to spoil a classic dinner, but someone's nicking their spaghetti and meatballs between shots. Tony should consider security. Brace yourself, folks. But, if anything, I think I like Tramp's following gesture even more, giving her the last meatball and all. Here's an example of the backgrounds doing their thing. This pan through the alley and stars. It may be overly sweet, but is that a bad thing? Another nice thing about the old-fashioned nostalgic small town vibe is this shot. It's like any film with lovers in cars gazing at the moonlight, except even more nostalgic with chariots instead of cars. Do they not obey their own rules? They're only supposed to take dogs without a license. Yes, it ends up being temporary, but still. Notice how the shadows of the bars look like the stripes of prison uniforms on the dogs? It's not kept for the whole sequence, but it doesn't need to be. It does its job to increase the gloomy atmosphere. Okay, I dare even the cat people in the crowd to watch the dogs howling in sadness through to the end and not get at least a little misty-eyed. These puppies seal the deal for me. Aww. Maybe they're putting him down because he's too old, but to us, it's a cruel act. These dogs are too lovable for us to gel with that.
Let's see, there's been Lulu.
Yeah, and Trixie.
And Fifi.
Okay, it's too easy to parallel this to a woman discovering the man she has grown acquainted with has been acquainted with many other women before, if you get my drift.
He's a tramp, but they love him.
He's a Tramp is easily the film's second best song. Whoever's idea it was to get Peggy Lee involved deserves recognition. I also dig how Peg is clearly the first Disney character who's no virgin, and that includes the parents. Normally, this wouldn't be something I praise, but I'm full of surprises.
You're too nice a girl to be in this place.
Convention would hold these humans should be evil cardboard figures, but they're clearly just doing their job. The film has no villain or bad guys, and it really fits for the small town story. Disney cinema usually benefits from a great villain, but here the opposite is true.
Courage.
But I've never even considered matrimony.
This is a really bizarre plot element. I get they're doing it to offer ladies somewhere better to live, but matrimony? Come on now.
You're both very kind, and I do appreciate it, but...
Oh, pigeon!
The sound gap between Lady's butt and Tramp interjecting is too long, given Lady clearly wasn't losing her train of thought.
Who could ever harm a cute little trick like you?
Trick! That reminds me, who is Trixie?
The unrelated word that reminds the other character, folks, is brought to you by Lady and the Tramp.
And take this with you!
He didn't take it with him though. While it may be a bit off for the rat to be portrayed much more viciously, it fits, given how committed the film is to a dog's point of view. Plus, dogs are the ideal rat catcher. Cats only do it occasionally to brag. Tramp must have magic hair, because he's dry as soon as he enters. Why the rubber ducks squeak? Using cartoon sound effects is an art, folks. They can't just be slapped in willy-nilly. Throughout this sequence, Lady's chain comes and goes a few times. No respect for consistency here. Bad chain. So, what makes the chain just disconnect from Lady's collar?
We've been after this one for months. We'll take care of him.
It's not the Julie Andrews type of take care either. No, it's the Al Pacino kind.
A rat!
Rat. I misjudged him.
Well, there are several explanations of the rat being there, not just the one that has Tramp being innocent. I'm glad they jumped to that one, but still. I praised it earlier, but the sound design, folks, the slush splattering and everything, sound is just as much a tool as music in films, and classic Disney cinema knows it better than most.
We both know you've lost your sense of smell.
So Hattie or Hannity? Great clarity, Disney artists. It's so exhilarating, seeing Trusty live up to the old tracking tales told about him. We've all had that old relative or local whose tales we don't really believe until we see them in action once again. That's Trusty to a T. Unlike most cop-out deaths, this one doesn't bother me, for this film's universe has a sweet tone where everything surviving fits. The problem is how the shot plays it like Trusty is dead, with the fade to black and him not moving. Having him still talk would have shown he was only injured. Love the Christmas bookends the film. Fits for a fable love story. So none of them ended up as mixed breeds? Perfectly possible for none of the four to be, just very unlikely is all.
Where did you put the dog biscuits? You know, the box Aunt Sarah sent for Christmas.
There's two ways to interpret that. One, that Aunt Sarah felt remorse at treating the dogs badly. Or two, that she still can't stand them. Nice that we can take our pick, though I'm sure most of us lean towards the latter.
And I see you finally acquired a collar.
Complete with license.
Are we supposed to believe this is Jock's first time seeing Tramp in the time it took him and Lady to have puppies? Or that Tramp was only given a license after the puppies were born? Nice thing about having babies here, bar their cuteness, is that we see more unique dog mannerisms, like how they pick up their puppies.
I don't recollect if I've ever mentioned old Reliable before.
No, you haven't, Uncle Trusty.
So are they just being polite, or has he not told them? Also, why was the third Cocker Spaniel not speaking with the other two? Might as well go all the way, artists.
I haven't. Well,
But I'm willing to let it slide for his delight at having 4 new sets of ears to wow with his tails. I like it when Disney makes ambitious pictures as much as the next guy, but when a sweet, intimate film is this brilliantly realised, you can't help but love it. At that, the love story, often a weak element in Disney cinema, is a highlight. I realise I've had a few jokes at the expense of cat people trout. I don't judge you folks for preferring cats, honest I don't. But you can't blame me. Cats are basically the devil's helpers in this film's nostalgic world, and I defy you to not be touched by this film to some capacity. It's that warm and fuzzy. -4. Boy, the other dog-centric Disney films sure have their work cut out for them.